Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's being 6:30. We seem to have a number of different times on different clocks, but the correct one is the little round one up there, which is the atomic clock. So we shall begin. May start with apologies for absence, and we have one apology from Councillor Ms. Eachus, who did come to the meeting, and was looking so ill that we sent her home again on the grounds that none of us wanted to catch it, and I shouldn't think any of you would want to catch whatever it is that she's got. So she has gone home. Declarations of interest, do we have any around the table? I think not. There are none then. And we have the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 23rd of June. Is everybody happy with the minutes? Yep, as being correct, in which case I shall sign those later on. I should, because I've forgotten to do it, just advise you of the fire evacuation procedures in case we start to burn down. That there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room that go down the stairs and meet in War Memorial Park. Could I also remind you that the meeting is being webcast, and so everything that you say will be marked down and kept for posterity. And could I also ask that you turn off your mobile phones, or at least put them onto silent, and those of us who are sitting around tables not put their mobile phones on the table, because they only vibrate and make a lot of noise. Before we move, well, I'll just quickly deal with item 4 on the agenda, which is petitions, because there aren't any, so that is that. We then have nothing significant under urgent items, but something, an issue of fact, which I'll just bring to your attention. I shall read it to make sure I get it exactly right, which was that a challenge to a decision by the Borough Councillor's acting returning officer to reject a nomination paper for this year's parliamentary elections has today been thrown out by the High Court. The acting returning officer determined that the nomination paper from the Green Party was not valid as it was for two candidates in effect standing for election as a single job share MP for Parliament. The two candidates who had wanted to stand for the Green Party launched a High Court challenge to the acting returning officer's decision that their nomination was not valid under the rules of the Representation of People Act, and today in the High Court the judge ruled that the decision taken by the Council's acting returning officer was right and was strictly in accordance with the letter of the law. The Council was awarded £3,500 in costs. So that is just really for noting, nothing further than that. We then come to the substantive items for this evening. We have 3 papers. In view of the number of speakers who I have down to speak on item 7, Parks, Open Spaces and Playing Fields, and the Council motion, I propose to take that one first, and I shall go in order of those who have asked to speak, beginning with Mr. David Williams. But firstly, I shall ask you if you would to come up and to sit at this table here for the public speaker, and each member of the public has 2 minutes to present their case, and then I would follow that with those councillors who wish to speak on this particular paper, who have, as we know, 4 minutes on which to speak. But first of all, may I ask Councillor Ruffell to introduce the paper. Councillor Ruffell.
Thank you, Leader. The recommendation is set out in the paper that you have under Paper C. 2.1.2, that we ask that the Cabinet endorses the assessment criteria outlined at Appendix 2, that's the 10 points. 2.1.3 endorses the initial list of protected sites in the Council's freehold ownership at Appendix 3. So for people listening, these are sites that the Council owns, and it is not definitive of all sites. That clearly there will be other sites that the Council owns which will come forward for assessment in due course. This list has been compiled based upon what Council members have suggested in the numerous discussions that have gone on so far. 2.1.4, refers the proposed assessment criteria and decision-making process to full council for approval. Of course, this originally arose at full council, and 2.1.5 notes that consequent changes to the Constitution will be made to reflect the proposed decision-making process outlined in this report. I think it's a paragraph 8 in the report. It deals with the fact that it will take a full council resolution to take a site that has been designated as protected to become unprotected. And I would like to add 2.1.6, which I have here, because it was clear to me that there was no mechanism put in place just to spell out how a site, a site might come up, come forward, what would happen to it. And I'm going to say this, and I'd ask it be 2.1.6, that Cabinet agrees that where a site is raised with officers that satisfies the 10-point criteria in Appendix 2, then it is automatically added to the list of protected sites, subject to prior notification of ward members and the Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure. So it automatically, if it's satisfied, goes on the list, subject to prior notification. To give you two examples, a site has been raised by someone, not a councillor, but someone within a ward. The officers look at it and say it satisfies the criterion. Then the ward councillors are notified, look, we're minded to put it on the list, and just in case the ward councillors have something to say about it, and if there's nothing arises, then it will automatically go forward. But that also copes with this situation. There are, I think, 4 sites that are currently subject to Exception 10, and it was clear to me from reading this that it didn't say what would happen when Exception 10 may no longer apply. Exception 10, as we know, is specifically drafted in relation to the ongoing consideration of sites for the football club. And there's going to come a point where that will no longer apply to some or all of those sites. We don't know what the answer to that is at this moment in time. So what would happen? Well, this would then bite immediately, because where a site is raised with officers, and that would include the existing sites, that satisfies the 10-point criteria. It would automatically go on and be added to the list of protected sites, subject to prior notification of ward members. So when those considerations have reached their fulfilment, those other areas which currently have had the Exception 10 applied to them, it would mean that the ward members would be told and the Cabinet Member would be told, look, it's now going to get full protection. I should just remind all listening, especially councillors, of one fundamental principle which might have been lost somewhere in the past in this discussion. We cannot bind our future successors. What we are doing tonight is saying that we as a council in 2015 value these sites, all of them, even those with the Exception 10 criteria. And we value, no doubt, other sites that we haven't yet put on this list. We want to give them protection. It is our will that protection will continue into the future, but we have to understand that whilst we have put some checks and balances in place, a future council of whatever complexion, whatever distance in the future, could decide otherwise. And so all we're trying to do is reassure our residents that that is the will of this authority at this given moment in time. And with some of the sites, quite clearly, it's been the will of this council for a long period of time prior to this as well. I would like, obviously, to address the comments that we're about to hear a bit later.
Thank you, Councillor Raffel. Mr. Williams, good evening. You have 2 minutes. The light will come on after. Press the big one. When I press this button, the green light will come on, and I will give you a warning when we get to 30 seconds left for your 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, good evening again, Mr. Chairman and Cabinet members. My concern is the recommendation to change the Council's constitution. Where are the detailed amendments that you propose to make? I can't find them. This report, obviously, that we're looking at tonight is primarily directed to facilitate the proposed football stadium location on the Old Common. Now, I've looked at all 250 pages of the Constitution, and hands up, councillors, how many of you have read parts of the Constitution in the last 2 or 3 weeks? Anyway, the Constitution I've looked at has particular emphasis on what you do, what your personal responsibilities are, and also as a cabinet. You currently have authority to authorise the disposal of council land or interests in it in which you are pursuing at considerably less than its market value. That is a free gift for 150 years to a severely financially challenged private business. This alone makes you responsible for full disclosure of information. The Cabinet now have a duty to disclose the due diligence searches on the financial viability of the proposed support to gift the land to the football club. This is required by your Constitution. There is no exemption allowed, and all details have to be disclosed, since it relates to proposed development of council land for which the council may grant planning permission. That's what the Constitution says. You have already fallen foul of the Supreme Court.
Conclude, please.
Can you give me 10 seconds, please? You have already fallen foul of the Supreme Court judgment reconsultation and the principles applied to public bodies, including inefficiencies and failure to be completely open and transparent on previous decisions. And finally, if you approve these recommendations tonight, you are open to challenge by the local authority ombudsman and the National Commissioner responsible for the Freedom of Information Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Next speaker is Lynn Thorne. There we go. Good evening.
Good evening.
Let the same apply. You have 2 minutes. As from when the red light comes on, I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds.
Thank you. Despite the report in yesterday's Gazette, I must reiterate I am not against Basingstoke Football Club. I'm against any building on the Old Common - Memorial Park. Can I ask, has Clause 10 been applied to all the sites in Appendix 3 which could be considered as an alternative? Because I believe that there are at least 3 that aren't on the list. The legal commentary contained within item 4.5 of the report states that the Cabinet are not bound by the 1979 Council decision. Is there a procedure for overruling previous Council decisions? I did look at the Constitution and can find nothing to explain the process. I would ask whether a decision to enter negotiation can take precedence over a decision to commit. If the Council are not bound by the 1979 decision, does it therefore not follow that they're not bound by the decisions to pursue the discussions with the football club on the Old Common land? If this is the case, then the exceptions criteria at Clause 10 is irrelevant, as the Council decision can be overturned. In fact, the whole paper in protecting any of the Council land can be overturned at any point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And our next speaker is Debbie Reevell. Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. Right, you have 2 minutes from now.
This one? Okay. This council motion seeks to protect parks and open spaces throughout the borough, yet Cabinet is seeking to exclude from it the only open space on which, as far as I am aware, the council has ever accepted a recommendation to keep it undeveloped and of an open character. What is the point of a council decision if it can be openly disregarded? Why bother with this document at all? At the conclusion of the meeting on the 17th of March, Councillor Sanders said that there was no obligation on the Council to provide a site for BTFC. yet there appears to be a determination to ensure that the site will be the old common. The legal advice says that under the proposed assessment criteria, the site would not have been on the list of protected sites, but this is not true. It would at the very least have qualified under number 3, does the green space provide for residents on a neighbourhood or ward basis? Clearly this site does that. Therefore the site would have been a protected site and the 1979 decision would have been a relevant consideration. The legal advice goes on to say that extensive work was carried out to establish if anything existed which would prevent it, the old common, being used in this way. If this was the case, why wasn't the 1979 recommendation found and the other evidence which the Heritage Society presented to the Council's lawyers? Had the Council known about the 1979 decision, they could not have entered into a negotiation in 2012. Does this mean the Council has to let BTFC have the old common because it has been offered to BTFC Limited without any proper investigation of the status of the site and that we cannot now withdraw? We urge Cabinet to uphold the 1979 decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We now have Mr. Dawson. Mr. Dawson. Good evening.
Good evening,
You
Dean.
have
Thank you very much for
2 minutes.
allowing me to speak. Thank you. I'm here to argue the case for retaining this site in question. I may normally be associated with talking on behalf of rural areas and villages, but I do think that it's important to retain green open spaces in towns and urban areas as well. So I've looked at the documentation. I think the legal advice that you've obtained is unclear and possibly confusing, inconclusive, I would say. I take the points that Councillor Raffel has made about not binding successors. That's entirely right, and it's not helpful to have blanket policies either. But you're here today, sir, I think, to make a decision on this particular site and whether it may go forward for some kind of a development. Can I suggest that what you ought to do is to pass a resolution to say that the site be retained as an essential part of the borough's local parks and open spaces strategy, that the old common plays an important role in the informal recreational infrastructure of the town, and that it be protected. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right. Next we have Councillor Parker, first of his 2 appearances, the first one being on behalf of Helen Richards. And so for this one you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Helen Richards, local resident. I wish to express my huge disappointment in the Council's decision not to take this opportunity to protect the old common. You only have to see the hundreds of people taking part in the weekly fun run, the thousands of people parking on the Old Common to walk to the Transport Festival, and the tens of thousands of people attending Basingstoke Live, plus many other well-attended events and sporting activities, to see the value of the large open space so near the centre of town. We see government advice to local authorities to improve good quality open space in order to tackle obesity and health inequalities. Other authorities have come up with imaginative ways to use direct land and landfill sites to provide land for sports stadia away from residential areas. It is hard to understand the criteria used to determine which council decisions are deemed to be binding. The 1979 decision to keep the Old Common undeveloped and open is apparently not binding, yet the 2012 decision to endorse the principles of making the Old Common available for a football stadium is legally binding. This latter decision apparently takes precedence over the Council's present commendable intention to protect Basingstoke's green areas, and yet there has still been no unbiased public consultation to ascertain whether the people of Basingstoke wish to lose this area over open space. Please could the Cabinet explain why the 2012 agreement with the football club was apparently of a legally binding nature when the Council did not know whether or not the public would support the proposal to lose such a significant open space?
Thank you. Don't go, please don't go, because you're the next speaker on the list of councillors. So I'll just adjust the time for that. Right, there we go. You have 4 minutes.
I have here a letter to the Gazette this April featuring Councillor Mrs Terry Reid and fellow Conservative councillor Rebecca Bean, who states how pleased she is to see that the council has decided not to pursue the option to use Chatsworth Green for much needed allotments, commenting, I quote, "The suggestion of using this piece of open space at Chatsworth Green was very quickly and understandably met with resistance from residents due to its close proximity to a number of properties, the potential impact it may have on already limited parking, loss of open space." Does that sound familiar? Another group of residents have been saying the same things about their open space. Councillor Bean gives her thanks to the residents by showing community spirit and working together to protect Chatsworth Green. Residents in my ward have also shown community spirit. Some are here tonight. They have been working together to protect their green open space. So, why are we here again fighting to protect old common land sited in Eastrock Ward? In March 2015, Cabinet resolved to undertake a review of land in the Council's ownership in order to establish whether any land is available and appropriate as a potential location to accommodate Basingstoke Town's Football Club. Councillor Sanders' summary of that meeting stated, "This must be concluded as honestly and transparently as possible. This report tonight fails to disclose all the facts. Where are those other sites referred to that fall into the category of assessment? Why are these other sites not listed on Appendix 3 with an asterisk? Reliance is given to the decision in 2012. However, Councillor Gavin James and I have demonstrated that a report detailing the analysis of sites considered for a football stadium, which clearly showed the old common site scored less against the criteria of site suitability, was not provided to councillors at the Overview Committee, not included in the Cabinet report, not disclosed to full council. This, I believe, goes against the Council's principles of corporate governance. Furthermore, it was not just a recommendation of a subcommittee in 1979 to protect this site. It was, in fact, a decision of full council on the 15th of March 1979, and I suggest you get your legal to reconsider this advice. I have a copy of those minutes and I will pass them on to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parker. Next we have Councillor Westbrook. Good evening. 4 minutes.
Thank you. Before I begin, can I ask that members turn to page 35 of 94 of the agenda, page 7 of 12, Appendix 1, item 4.5, which most of my comments will relate to. And in addition, I'll reference the proposal criteria in Appendix 2, page 37 and 38 of 94, and also the photographs which I've provided. Being a member for Brookvale and Kings Furlong, I previously put forward an amendment to consider Sinclair Drive open space as a site for possible protection from development. Most of the discussions I've had have been covered accurately within the Officer Commentary in Appendix 1. Since the original assessment list, Sinclair Drive open space has been removed as it was not in the borough's ownership. However, on the 22nd of May, Sinclair Drive open space was transferred under a Section 106 agreement and is now owned and maintained by the borough. That agreement clearly states that the transfer should contain a covenant by the council restricting the use of the site transferred to the purpose for which it is laid out. So Sinclair Drive, from having wrongly been put in the assessment list, was then taken out of the list, and now I'm suggesting it be reassessed and added back in as it has been in and out so many times, perhaps we should be renaming it the Okie Open Space. Seriously though, if we look at item 4.5.4, it clearly states, irrespective of its current ownership status, the site does not meet any of the proposed criteria and therefore will not be afforded protection. This I strongly disagree with. The reasoning for this is simple. If you look at the photographs and ordnance survey map I've circulated, in my opinion it is quite clear. Some of the green spaces identified in the photographs have already been afforded protection in my ward and were added to the list having met qualifying criteria 4 and 9. Sinclair Drive open space is a substantial area measuring 2,900 metres square. In addition, at nearly 0.3 hectare, that is well above the area required for multifunctional use. So I believe that this open space meets criteria 4 as it has a secure soft surface play area for toddlers and juniors up to 12 years old and has the overall potential to be used for a community event space as it is already being used for informal football games, picnics and dog exercising. It has an ornamental garden, an avenue of beech trees and is completely enclosed by ornamental railings. As it meets criteria 6 on size, there is already a presumption that it would have been used for a special status event such as the Queen's Jubilee if it had been in the borough's ownership at the time and wasn't so new. This is referenced in criteria 7. Finally, this open space serves 300 homes and in addition is directly accessed and used by Winterton Way, which has a further 450 homes and no open space or play equipment of its own. I would therefore suggest that it could easily fulfil criteria 9 of having significant community value. Together along with the Community Association, we're all looking to build community bonds across the whole ward and taking in all new developments, and I think you'd agree how important a role green spaces like this have to play in the future. And so in closing, I'd like to invite Councillor Ravel to visit the site with me, because as we all know from development control, you really do need to visit sites to get a true understanding of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And next on the list, I was lost. Councillor Mrs. Frankham. Whenever you're ready. Good evening. Right, you have 4 minutes.
Right, thank you, and good evening. I've come from not a huge space that's not in the map, but it's a big space in Popley because there's so little of our green area left. Popley's more than doubled its housing and buildings, and all the time it's been our green spaces that have been lost. The piece of land I'm talking about is at the back of Marnell Lodge, which is a sheltered accommodation. And this was actually given to Basingstoke-Dean, handed over by David Wilson Homes, because it was going to be a football pitch. Do you know it's the last piece of flat, piece of green that's in Popley West? We have no other area that is flat that you could play on. So basically what I'm asking for is that you please look again at this piece of land and protect it, because it's not only just the worry that it's flat land, but we've had so much development. The residents are really, really concerned that it will be developed, further development on there. We've had a community group that unfortunately at the moment has fallen foul, but they did do a community plan, and this area was very, very, very much at the top of their list for leisure areas, and I am concerned as they are that it will be gone. In my mind, if you build much more, and we haven't objected before, you've not had objections to build in Popley, despite an ex-councillor saying that we did. No, we didn't. It was, when we did, it was in Sherborne St John. It was not Popley. We've welcomed our new neighbours. We know we need housing. We understand we need housing. But we also need to breathe. These pieces of green are our lungs, and so please, please protect it. I don't want to see it developed. I know you've got certain criteria that you can probably use, and you can change this, and I sincerely hope that you do listen to the pleas of our residents. I'm not going to go on all this laws and all this, and you can do this and you can't do that. I just want you to think about the future, about people and how we feel. And I know this council likes parks. There's a great big banner outside. It's Parks, Love Your Parks Week. Well, can you prove it, please, and protect my last piece of land that, quite frankly, we've got some really, really exciting plans that we will be applying for lift money as well as 106. So please don't, protect it so that we can do that. All right? Thank you.
Just to give us the name of the thing, because I heard her say it's the back of
I beg your pardon. When you know an area so much and love it so much, you think everybody else does. It's actually at there's Carter Lane, Carter Way, going round past Oxford Way, up by the Everest School. Okay?
Lovely, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
If we haven't found it yet, we will do. Councillor Reagan. Good evening.
Good
You
evening.
have
It's the
4
first time I
minutes.
spoke before Cabinet since I've been back on the council.
Well, welcome back then.
so, thank you. I come to speak about Stratton Park, which is not protected. I speak as a ward council that surrounds two sides. It's Southam and the Berg State, and it's a much loved park actually. I mean, I was just sitting there thinking years ago, Councillor Tony Jones and I used to play over there, and it was farmers' fields actually. But yeah, I think we forget about that for a moment. But it's a lovely place. You've got 3 football pitches and a cricket pitch. Lovely squirrels, and it's well used for dog walkers and well lighted. So it's there. We light for the future. I mean, as I say, it's still out there to be considered for the football ground. I mean, it's not suitable as because the road structure for there would not be able to carry even 250 or 300 attendants, let alone if it got bigger. And also, I noticed there was a report from 2009 and said that it was not longer suitable because the area is not big enough, high environmental impact, high impact on residents, and there would be the loss of the 3 football pitches and the cricket pitch. So I would appeal that it's kept in for all of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We should be hearing from you again later, so you get 2 goes having come back. Councillor Tony Jones. I trust you've recovered from playing football with Councillor Reagan. Perhaps we'll draw a line. Right.
Anyway,
You've got 4 minutes.
thanks for allowing me to speak. Colin, Councillor Reagan, has outlined what have come about Stratton Park. Basically, it's the only open space in Buckskin itself that is big enough to sort of entertain anything that goes on. It is used quite a lot. What I don't understand, we had a motion 2 years ago to protect these parks, and what I really can't understand is why it's not being protected now, because it's being offered, as I understand, as a possible site for the Basingstoke Football Club. Now, it makes a bit of a nonsense, so if they don't want it, we can protect it. Surely it should be the other way around, unless I've got it upside down. But all I'm saying really is, at the bottom line is, it's a well-used park. It actually covers 3 wards, Kempshott, Buckskin and Southam. And in certain times it actually helps with the athletics and things like that for parking and places like that. When you have the run-in and what have you, that's an overspill place. So it's well used, and it's well used for the purposes it was built for. And I believe, well, I know what's going on in my ward. We're now talking about using it a lot more for the community, because that's the prime mover to get people to use our open spaces. And if we're going to just offer up sites because it's convenient or whatever to other people, surely as a ward councillor we should be consulted before so we can put our 2p in. And secondly, that we should be a little bit discerning where we offer sites up to, and I would actually go along with the people who are talking about the common. You know, I came to Basingstoke in 1963 from London, and I've never looked back, and it seems to me we're in a great danger of losing our open spaces around the town, and I'd urge you all in the Cabinet to rethink this paper completely and come back at another time and have more consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then finally, Councillor Gavin James. Four minutes.
Good evening. This is the first time I've addressed Cabinet since probably the last time you met. I don't think anyone realised that when this motion was passed with cross-party support, it'd be so complex to implement, with potential legal challenges delaying its progress. You've heard a lot of comments tonight, and in my view, the Cabinet effectively has four options as the way forward. The worst of those options is probably the option that's recommended, and certainly one I'd advise against. In March 2015, the Cabinet agreed to review potential sites. Now, in the new appendix of sites, some have been removed and been included as exception criterion 10 applies. Others haven't, others that would be large enough to accommodate a football stadium. Now, even with a bit of work, I think that's going to be risky in terms of predetermination. You could remove all the sites, or you could remove none of the sites. To remove some of the sites, leaving some in that could potentially host a football ground, would be dangerous. I point with interest to Downgrange playing fields. Whilst it may not be ideal for a football pitch, I was there on Saturday and I have to say no one else was. It's a big open space, and at the moment it's going to be protected from development. Now, if the hockey club, the rugby club or the athletics later want to add a stadium or something, or include some more building work and changing rooms to that area, actually they won't be able to because of this protection. So that's one that I would certainly consider going away and thinking about a bit more and what we actually mean by protection. But either way, I think the legal risk tonight, of course, is predetermination. You're taking away a number of sites, but not all of the sites that potentially could house a football stadium. Option two is the Cabinet could pull the paper, but I appreciate residents' frustration. It's been over 2.5 years since the motion, or around 2.5 years since the motion. It's come to Cabinet 4 times, and to put it again tonight would start looking, or perhaps look increasingly silly. The legally safe approach is not the one I'm going to recommend you do, but the legally safe route would be, although the substance is hollow, is the Cabinet could approve the assessment criteria without acceptance criteria 10, but defer protection of any sites until the full review into the football stadiums has happened. So the criteria 1 to 9 you could agree tonight as a principle and put that before full council, but deferring any site selection until after the football ground situation is resolved. Perhaps the best option, but you would imagine I'd come up with this, of course, is to do exactly the same, remove exception criteria 10, and then protect all the sites, removing all asterisks. Very similar to the motion, or the amendment I moved in full council, which you can find on section 4 of appendix 2, which is page 30 of 94. Now, there was legal advice in relation to this amendment, which effectively got rid of exception criteria 10. But of course, that's now out of date, because in March 2015, you took a decision to review all sites. You could decide tonight that all the sites are so important, and the green jewels in our crown, if you like, that you want to protect all of them, and therefore it wouldn't apply. The 2012 decision that's effectively kept the asterisks, obviously we have a difference over that. It very clearly says without prejudice. Without prejudice is a legal term. It means that we're not bound by any agreement we reach. We're just simply entering into negotiations. Clearly no decision was taken by the council whether they supported the lease of the land, otherwise you wouldn't have had a consultation afterwards, because you don't consult on a decision you've already made. So that decision there is easily get rid of all. If 1979 can be superseded by 2012, then I'm sure 2012 can be superseded by 2015. Very clearly in 2015 decision paper that you agreed in March of this year, it says negotiations with the club and the old common site have ceased. not been frozen, not deferred, not suspended, they have ceased. So the Old Common should be treated fairly and equally with all the other sites. Whichever way you progress tonight, there's no reason for that asterisk. So you either exclude all of the sites until that decision is made, or include all of the sites and let the decision take place without those sites as options.
Thank you. Quite a lot of points to cover there, Councillor Raffel.
Well, thank you, Leader. Can I thank all those who made contributions? We, as a Cabinet, can say that we understand exactly what you're saying, and the value of open space is the same for all of us across the borough, wherever we live. The difficulty is, in the background to this, as some of you have realised, is this decision on the football club, which is not going to be made here tonight, but will be made hopefully sooner rather than later. Hopefully the process will start in September of this year, and when that decision is made, it will then clarify once and for all whether any of these sites are to be challenged and used, or whether in fact all of them can go forward as protected sites. The difficulty is the two things are happening at the same time. Whilst you and I and the Cabinet want to see the existing open spaces protected, at the same time the borough has third-party interests, which means that it has legal considerations with third parties, and at the same time has to make a decision on where the best site for the football club can be for the benefit of the borough, because there are other interests at play here. Football is a very important sport for many people, just as open space is a very important area for many people, and there are competing interests. And that's the difficult job that politicians have. We don't go into politics to hide, we go into politics to make decisions, having listened and consulted, obviously. And the decisions that we have to make, at some point, a decision will have to be made about the football club, and the borough, as a council, will hopefully come up with a decision that meets the various interests, competing interests. Can I just deal with some of the things that have been raised? Perhaps easiest to say is in relation to Councillor Westbrook. He has indicated that the site has changed its status. What I would urge upon him is to bring it again to the officers and urge them to reconsider it now its status has changed. And if he is unsuccessful, raise it with me and I'll raise it with the officers. But as he has said, it's changed and it may well satisfy the criteria from what he's saying. It's not my judgment, but it will be. I'll be interested to hear what he's got to say about it. Councillor Mrs Frankham clearly has brought a site forward. As I said when I opened this, there were going to be more sites that might come forward. Again, put it before the officers and let's see if we can get it added to the list. The full council decision is due, it will be in October, so there is time to see if we can get it on the list, both of those sites, between now and then. And I would happily, if that's the officers' satisfaction that they should be on the list, then obviously that would be part of the full council recommendation. Councillor Regan and Councillor Tony Jones make understandable points about Stratton Park, but in the interests of transparency, it is being considered. It's been mentioned in the other forum about being considered as publicly owned open space that could be considered. Whether or not it will meet that challenge is not for me to decide. But it would, in the interests of transparency, on one level, as Councillor Gavin James has said, this paper could be dressed up in different ways. It could have that none of the sites are being considered by the football club, could be mentioned on it. But how disingenuous would that be to the residents who were thinking, well, hold on a minute, we thought we were protected, but now another council decision could supersede it. So what the officers have tried to do is try and put on one piece of paper the fact that there are these competing interests which will run out at a future date, hopefully sooner than later, and then the transparency will be clear that certainly 3 out of 4 if not 4 out of 4, will no longer be subject to the exception and will become protected. So whilst I understand fully what they both say about Stratton Park, I'm afraid that's the nature of having been mentioned in another forum as potential sites. It's been said by Councillor Gavin James, that there were other sites that may have been mentioned. That's probably right. There probably were other sites, but they may not necessarily meet the criteria for protected open space. That's why they're not on this list. Or if they do, they'll come forward in due course.
Very quickly then, please. We don't normally allow points of clarification.
I know, but I'd hate to make you to make a wrong decision without the full information. It's entirely my fault for not explaining properly. There are lists on the protected list that haven't got exception criteria 10 by them that would be large enough to accommodate a football stadium. Many of them are unpalatable, but I consider Old Common to be unpalatable. But there are sites on this list that are large enough to host a football stadium, and therefore they should be treated in an equal way with the Old Common. At the moment we're down to 4 options, but actually I see about another 5 options on here that are large enough, so they should be equally accepted by criteria 10, or Old Common should be included with all of them.
Leader, Councillor Gavin Davies did say that actually the first time round, and I did appreciate that. The point is they haven't been, they're not being considered apparently, and I can only react to, as the Cabinet member, to the sites that are being considered that are therefore on this list. Those sites, other sites that you might be mentioning, aren't, and so that's why they're not there. Can I move on to what the members of the public have said? Firstly, Mr. Williams, he asked about the change in the Constitution. The change would be that any change to the designation status as protected would require a vote of full council. That's what the constitutional change is about. Can I deal with what Lynn Thorne said? I understand what she has said about being against building an Old Common, and perhaps it might just bear a little bit of reflection to look at what has been said about Old Common in the past, because it's not new that the residents close to Old Common, and probably wider afield too, regard the site as important open space. The background to it, which bears some consideration, because it just puts it into context, was back in 1972, when a planning inspector was conducting a public inquiry about a number of different things, and as a sort of side wind said, in his view, it would be more appropriate for any land of the existing common on the north side of the A30, so clearly the area we're talking about, was not required for roads and school purposes, and to remain public open space as part of the extended war memorial or otherwise. Now that was his view then, back in 1972, but clearly that's a lot has happened to Basingstoke since. And as we know, both a school and other development has taken place there. Following that comment by him, there was a planning application for a hotel on the site, and it was refused by the Borough Council on the basis of what the inspector had said. But then in 1979, the Borough Council became concerned and thought, well, actually we do want a hotel, so how do we deal with it? And it therefore thought, well, it will have to regard to what the planning inspector had said about the importance of the open space, but at the same time would have a hotel and a school. And this is what it says: the council recognised that should. The point is that matters had changed. The council recognised that should this development take place, then such land as will remain between the hotel site and any possible school requirements, because they were talking about expanding the school, be left undeveloped and of an open character. So that was the will of council back in 1979, and the will of council clearly is that if possible the site should remain as public open space now in 2015. But, and the big but is, but we also need to deal with the football club. And until such time as the football club is dealt with, well, we do. And that's it. I'm not going to discuss merits of why. And the result of that is that when we have dealt with the football club, it will become clear whether this site is to be considered for it.
Excuse me, please. This is not a debate going on. He is answering the points which have been made earlier on.
So the points that I've been trying to explain is that we cannot bind our successors. Circumstances change, and what we are trying to do is, as it were, raise the threshold before any of these important open spaces are made subject to development by making it a full council decision. And that's about all we can do. We can't do more than that. And those, I'm afraid, if you've been told otherwise, you've been told wrongly. And if you've been told that previous decisions bind this council in perpetuity, you've been told wrongly. That's all I can say, Leader. I'm afraid sometimes people don't understand things, and sometimes people see it for their own reasons. But the fact is we are doing our best as an authority. We've got called upon as a will of full council to try and put in place a policy that would protect open spaces, because we were told by the majority of council felt that this would be a good idea. But if we end up not very far forward from where we started, there's no surprise about that. And that's the difficulty we face, because we cannot bind our successors. All we can do is state this year it is our will that we keep these open spaces as open spaces. And it would be my desire to keep this, bring this to everyone's attention on a yearly basis if necessary, so that each year we reinforce that importance to us, just as the residents understand that on a daily basis these open spaces are important to them. I want to say one other thing about what Councillor Gavin James was saying. When we last met as a cabinet, he was exhorting upon us, as he's told us again tonight, that we should get rid of the exceptions criteria and make this policy effectively retrospective on all publicly owned open space. And we balked at that idea because we realised that we had third-party interests, legal agreements in place with a number of different interests, and to suddenly ride roughshod over all of them would result in litigation, potentially. We received advice that told us that's exactly right. You can't suddenly turn around and say, well, we're going to ignore our existing agreements with third parties. And I know that some members of the public haven't quite appreciated, because it perhaps hasn't been explained to them properly, that there is a distinction between a decision of full council that then can be changed because it only affects full council, and a decision with a third party, where third parties have invested time and money and effort and public commitments and various other interests into going in a particular direction because they're in partnership with the borough council in a particular area or agreement, whatever that may be and wherever it may be. And then suddenly for the full council to suddenly change in the opposite direction and say, no, thank you very much, we're not doing that. It has implications. And it's the right way to deal with it is to deal with each of those situations discreetly, and if, as one of them happens to be the football club, that has to be dealt with discreetly until such time they are no longer, the site itself is no longer, has a third-party interest upon it. And then when that has happened, we can then go back into designating these sites. So my recommendation to Cabinet, and I'd urge Cabinet to endorse this recommendation, is to put this forward to full council. I reject what Councillor Gavin James said. One of his options was to do nothing, to say let's just have criteria 1 to 9 and don't put any sites on it. I think that's wrong. We want to move forward. If the will of council is that those other sites should be designated and protected, well, let's get on and do it. And I want to do that. And let's mark the card of the I say that's almost a football analogy, but mark the card of those people considering the football club that we want them to hurry up and make a decision. Because I want to see the exception 10 criteria taken away. And I think Councillor Parker perhaps possibly misunderstood, he may not have done, that there are 3 other sites on this list, Stratton Park being one of them, that are unfortunately subject to exception 10 because of the football club issue. No, but they don't need an asterisk because of the asterisk, because the rest of War Memorial Park does satisfy the criteria. That's why it's on the list. See, it's a different kettle of fish. It's mixed. That's why, and that should perhaps be clearly understood by all concerned. So consequently, I want to see the exception 10 criteria got rid of as soon as it has. That's why I've said we should have that little amendment, because as soon as it happens, it should be automatic that the 3 or the 4 become protected, with ward members becoming aware of that and notified of that. So I would urge the Cabinet to endorse this, put it before full council in October, and I'm certainly happy to hear further representations from the councillors who have other sites to consider, and certainly by the meeting of full council in October, maybe some of the decision-making process on the football club will have started. And it might just be, who knows, it might just be by then some or all of these sites might have fallen away. All right? Because in September the meetings start. And that would be a good solution for some or all of you who are listening.
Councillor Parker, would you please be quiet and behave as we expect our councillors to behave in these meetings?
Yeah. Leader, can I
And
just
so-
say...
No, you can't at the moment. I'm speaking.
Very unhelpful.
May I say that you have absolutely no evidence that any decision has been made, because no decision has been made. You have my assurance that no decision has been made, and therefore if you wish to doubt that, you are doubting my honour and my integrity.
Where's the transparency in this whole process?
I'm not arguing with you this evening, Councillor Parker. Thank you very much for your contribution earlier. That's enough. Right. Other members, do we have any comments to make? Nope. Right. Just in summing up, the first thing to be very clear is we are not making any decision about the football club this evening. This whole paper is not about making a decision about the football club. No matter how people might choose to bend other people's words or to give that indication that that's what it's about, it is not. It is about trying to protect all these open spaces that are listed on here and to lay down a formula for other open spaces to be protected in the future. Any decision about the football club will only come after due consideration of all the facts through a process which will be open and transparent later on this year, as has already been planned and already been communicated to all members. The fact that there is an asterisk against War Memorial Park, as there is indeed against Daniel Park, does not mean to say that Daniel Park is being considered for the location of the football club. What it actually says is, under the asterisk, part of the site is excluded in accordance with clause 10 of the proposed criteria. In other words, parts of the sites are being considered. It's as obvious as possible. There is absolutely no hidden agenda in putting an asterisk in there to try and explain a simple fact that is on a table. It would seem to me to be totally wrong that sites which can be afforded protection should not be afforded protection as soon as possible. I entirely agree with Councillor Raffel that it would be my wish that we would get the whole question about whether there is any land which can be suitable for the football club that we wish as a council to offer to the football club is available or not. And that is what will come out of the whole process of evaluation to be followed by consultation. We never finished the consultation process the last time round. That we are only redoing now because of a legal case totally different to ours somewhere else, but which had a bearing on the way that we had carried it out. It was nothing to do with this council that caused us to reconsider that, but it was only right that we should do given the legal standing of that situation. Other than that, this paper, I think, meets the requirements that Council charged us with trying to provide, which is a framework for affording protection to as many open spaces as we possibly can, and hopefully to many more in the future. If there are any others to be added on, this Carter's Way, I think it is, in Popley, or Sinclair Drive, I'm sure Councillor Raffel would like a trip round both of them one evening to go and look at them. And if they are, if there are very good cases for arguing it, then let's agree to argue it. Or if there are any other ones that people have, this should be a living list. It should not be something which is just put in aspect and delivered from there. So, members, are we? What is our view? I personally would be in support of this. In support? Good. Right. That is passed then. Let us now go back to paper B, and we have one speaker on paper B for the second time tonight, Councillor Reagan. Well, you might want to come forward and then just have a pause while the crowd goes back. Yes, don't do. Well, I can say that. Yeah. Right. If you can just twiddle your thumbs for a second. Right, we will move on to paper B, the commissioning outcome group 3, access to public transport. I believe you're going to do a double act on this one with Councillor Mrs Osselton and Councillor Tate, beginning with Councillor Mrs Osselton.
Thank you, Leader. I've worked closely with Councillor Tate and officers on this COG 3. And this report, it summarises the findings of the Borough Council's Public Transport Subsidy Review, details the changes made to local services as a result of the County Council's review of local bus and community transport services, and outlines the process undertaken by COG 3, setting out the current position of existing services, as well as bringing together recommendations for future delivery from all 3 areas of work.
Thank you, Councillor Osland. And I just want to add on to the second part of the COG process, which to look at the wider impacts of the access to public transport which have been undertaken. And the report also includes how the improved promotion, the development of cycle strategy and real-time information systems are becoming part of the work which has become an outcome from the COG 3 process.
Thank you both. Councillor Reagan.
Yeah, back again, twice in one night. I was a member of the COG 3, and but I've not come to speak about that. I've really come to speak about the Southam bus services. And I appreciate the recommendation that from the portfolio holder, Councillor Austin, that the 3B be continued for another year. And I think the figures approved and the costings that approved it is accessible, it can be built, and we certainly advertise it locally through community magazines and my community column, and I think it bears fruit, and I think it warrants to be tried for another year, and also why I want it, I like to speak about the evening bus services. I think I'm pleased that's being recommended to continue for another 6 months. That's all the services. But I think one of the failings on the Stagecoach part, and just pointing out that the Ofcom committee, is that the lack of advertising on it. I think it needs to be pushed. I know I can see that the figures for the number 3, which is my ward, South Avenue, Friday and Saturday, are not good. And so it needs to be pushed, advertised. Certainly we will push it locally, but also it needs to be pushed through obviously council, but Stagecoach needs to advertise as well. But I mean, it's good for I'm going to come along and I actually praise. I'd like to thank Councillor Austin all the work she's done on providing the bus service for the Burke Estate and part of Southam, which suffered the cuts and the commercial routes 18 months ago, and also her team of Peter Smith, and that they've done a great job in this, and actually, and do listen as well. So, for once, you've got good news. Yeah.
Councillor Reagan, I'm shocked, stunned and amazed. No, and how nice it is to actually find that we are not doing something underhand and in an illegal or immoral fashion. It's very encouraging to know that occasionally we do act in the way that you would like us to do. I don't know, after that glowing response, Councillor Austin, did you have anything to say?
Yes, can I just say thank you, Councillor Reagan. I endorse what you say about communication. Now, last week I met with officers and with the new Managing Director of Stagecoach, Mike Watson, and we have decided that we have really got a gentleman's agreement at the moment with regard to communication, that they put out their bit because they're the commissioning service. But now we're going to sit down together and we're going to put together a proper communication plan and consultation, so that if any of the bus services we have to change, then we all sit down, three-party, with Hampshire County Council, and we're all saying the same thing, because I'm not quite happy with this business of just a gentleman's agreement. So yes, that will be, we've started on that already. Thank you.
Good, in which case if nobody has anything else to add.
I just want to say, Leader, that I'm glad there's mention of the cycle strategy which I'm responsible for, and I'm looking forward to bring a paper forward later in the year.
You're beginning to sound more and more like Boris Johnson every week. Good, that's fine. Right, in which case we'll take that as agreed as well, and then we'll move on to paper D, which is the paper on the combined authorities, Greater Hampshire working together, and Councillor Westbrook wishes to speak on this. Now, to give you a fair opportunity to speak on it, I think it would be appropriate that we try and, since this is such a fast-moving situation at the moment. That's excellent. We'll have an update on where we are at the moment, just in case there's anything within the update that you want to comment on. That was the point I was going to make. And there is also a revised decision notice, which hopefully everybody has had a copy circulated around. That is in part a reflection of the speed at which things are moving, because that follows on from a meeting with group leaders last night, when it was very useful to have their input on various aspects of this, and also further consideration, and indeed more news arriving by the hour during the course of today. So what I think I will do is ask the Chief Executive just to give us a status report of where we've got to, and then I will add a bit more clarity to some aspects of it. Well, I'm sure it won't be unclear, but a further piece of clarification after that. So, Chief Executive, if you could.
Okay. Thank you, Leader. The report is as on paper, but as you suggest, it is fast-moving and there is an update to provide. In terms of the latest situation, members will recall that I updated members at full council on the 16th of July as to the timetable at that time. And the proposal was that we would take an item to full council in September. That would then support the leader in his final negotiations in October, prior to submission to government in October, to influence the spending review in November. Following that statement, in the week after, I became aware that government were indicating to all local authorities that were seeking to take advantage of the ability to devolve powers to local authority level, in terms of putting proposals forward to government, that their wish was that those proposals were received by government by the 4th of September, considerably accelerating the timescale. So in that regard, in further discussion with colleagues, both in terms of the Chief Executive Group but also in terms of engaging with and briefing members, it seems appropriate to recommend to members, and indeed it's reflected in the revised decision notice, that we just need to adjust the timescale for member engagement in terms of this important process. Because notwithstanding that technical work has been done and that under the strong leader arrangement we have endorsed a expression of interest to government, clearly before we sign up to any proposal, it's absolutely right and proper that there should be full engagement with members and a debate and discussion at full council. So the proposal in front of you in terms of the revised draft decision notice makes reference to the latest development around government's request that proposals are received by the 4th of September. As a consequence of that, I'm recommending to the leader, and the leaders incorporated it within the draft decision notice, that there should be an all-member briefing in August, and the possibility of a full council meeting being called for the first week in September, so that members can formally give of their view before the proposal goes in. In addition to that, the draft decision notice has also indicated some red lines that I think have arisen out of the group leader discussions and discussions with members. I'm also conscious that the EPH committee have also discussed this issue. And in terms of giving clarity to all sides, because we're in a situation where we're negotiating with 14 other local authorities, and in due course those authorities will be negotiating with government. So it's extremely useful at this time to be very clear about what our red lines are for the negotiations that move forward. And therefore, in terms of the decision notice, it just makes it absolutely clear that there is an intention that there'll be no loss or control of existing borough council functions, no impact on the assets that we own or the income streams that we enjoy from those assets, or the funds that we get from government. So it's just making that very clear as we go into that process moving forward. So in terms of the broad picture, as on paper, but timescales have moved forward. Therefore, it's important that, notwithstanding that meetings in August are not ideal, I think it's important that members have the opportunity to put questions to receive a briefing from the leader and myself in an environment which is two-way prior to a debate at full council, and I think that's what we propose in the decision notice, Leader.
Thank you. That is indeed the case. I think what I need to do is to emphasise that exactly these same discussions are going on in 11 other districts and 3 unitary authorities right the way throughout Hampshire as we speak. I have a meeting tomorrow night of what is now termed a steering group of leaders, which consists of the 3 unitary authorities and then one person who's representing the southern districts and myself who's representing the northern districts there, to discuss a draft interim letter. But as with all interim letters, the more you put into a letter, the more it starts to clarify where we are. We've received that draft today. We have to discuss it tomorrow. I really don't know how far there will be unanimity on this letter until we have those discussions. We then hope to have a fuller draft version of that by the 12th of August, which will flesh it out even further, and that will be the subject, the basis upon which we will be briefing members, but bearing in mind that that will again be a draft, and then there'll be a refined version of that draft by the time we get to the 2nd or 3rd of September, when we will have the council meeting. It is not ideal, as the Chief Executive says. It may be that we will come to a conclusion that despite the fact that government wishes to have a deadline of the 4th of September, that all of us believe that this is not exercising the democratic process in the proper way that it should be exercised, and just decline to abide by that 4th of September deadline. That I think will gradually emerge as to whether that will be the case during the course of August. However, I think it is very important, and that's what is now included in the revised decision notice, is that there are some, and others may emerge, so we have been very careful not to be exclusive in this, and there is a slight wording even from the revised wording that you have there, to say that under point 3 that there are non-negotiable preconditions for our participation in the combined authority unless otherwise determined by council, because we can always change our minds about things, as we've just been debating at great length, but which may include, but are not necessarily limited to, and then the following points. And those points I think are worth emphasising, because it will be clearly wrong for us to enter into any kind of agreement which finishes up being to the disadvantage of our residents. That would be perverse in the extreme. And many of the benefits of our residents emanate from a number of specific aspects of the work that we do. First of all, the functions that we currently provide. We have a track record of very high levels of performance. Our residents think we perform extremely well as a council, both in terms of their satisfaction with what we do, with the value for money that we provide, and with their general satisfaction in the place that they live. And we do that because of the functions that we exercise. We therefore would not wish to give up control of any existing functions, and particularly with reference to, but again, not exclusively, the development control, our role as a local planning authority, and our ability to develop our own local plan. and all the policies that are included in it. Secondly, our benefits derive a great deal of benefit from the assets that we have, the properties that we own, the financial assets that we have, and the interests that we gain from those assets, and the way that that is used either to provide additional facilities, and we've just been talking about buses. We, as a district, put nearly £750,000 into the support of buses. That is not the responsibility of a district authority. Yet we do it because we can, because of the money that we earn off of our assets. At the same time, we've been able to hold our council tax for the last 5 years. We have the 6th lowest council tax in the country because of the assets that we hold. Therefore, making sure that we do not lose control of those assets or control of the income we derive from those assets is absolutely fundamental. Similarly, we derive quite a bit of benefit by the virtue of the fact that we have one of the largest house building programs have had, even in the quiet periods in the last few years post the recessionary. We have nevertheless built more houses than most other boroughs, certainly districts, in Hampshire, as a result of which we attract very high levels of new homes bonus. That is an important part of our income stream, and we have to ensure that anything that happens continues, but does not affect it in any way our ability to have and continue to have that income stream. Fourthly, we are spending a lot of time and effort in the refurbishment of Basingview and other economic activities. It is vital that if we put our money into achieving economic growth and to supporting economic growth, we are able to keep the benefits of that economic growth so we can continue to reinvest that money back into further economic growth for the borough. We do not want to sit here being the cash cow for other parts of Hampshire. I think it is also important that we take this opportunity to be really realistic about, are the right functions being done by the right people in local government, or is there unnecessary duplication, or is sometimes the providers of services maybe too far removed from the local people whom they are serving, and we could be in a better place to do that and remove certain double levels of management, etc. That is the discussion that we need to have with the County Council, and we've put forward a list of subjects that we wish to discuss with them, and whether these are things that we could actually eventually probably do better, either at lower cost or provide better services, or even ultimately do both, better services at lower cost. So that is something which we have to do. And then, just as one particular thing we put in here, that any governance model that is developed for a combined authority, and the one thing we do not want to see is another level of bureaucracy, another level of management creeping into local government. I mean, it's virtually impossible to work out how you would put in, reduce costs, get greater efficiencies, and put in another level of local government. I mean, it defies logic. But we must make sure that whatever is created as that governance structure is a model that actually gives equal status to all councils, all council leaders, it says here, so that we are equally represented with the rest, so that we are not disadvantaged in any way there. You could argue that we would be disadvantaged in that, to the extent that we are one of the largest boroughs, comparable with Portsmouth and Southampton, and that there are some other boroughs who are only half the size of us, and should they be getting the same number of votes as we do? I think that's one of those things that equal status covers that in a more generic term. So, summarise it, those are really important points, and I wanted to dwell on that because I think it's important we get that on the record for the benefit of the webcast as anything else, that those are key things. They are not necessarily the end of our list as we come to work our way through this. There may be other things that people may wish to put forward and will be given serious consideration. We do want to do this as collectively and openly as possible as we work forward on this. It's a fundamental change, or could be a fundamental change, which could have a major impact on the way that we all live for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So it is important equally that we do not, whilst people keep putting in new deadlines of the 4th of September or whatever, that we do not rush it and make major mistakes now that could come back to bite us in the not too distant future. Sorry about that lengthy introduction, but I think it's good that we try and get it as clear as possible. Would you like to come talk to us? Councillor Westbrook, for the purposes of the webcast, so your back of your head is identified. Actually, I think it gets to the front when I turn this off. I'm not even going to bother putting the timer on.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a brief statement, really. Probably on the lines of what you've been saying. It was envisaged on the previous timetable, as little as 2 weeks ago, that an all-member workshop be arranged at the beginning of September, and now, notwithstanding the fast pace, there is a commitment to keep members fully informed. As the government now appears to be in overdrive and a large proportion of councillors on holiday, this seems highly unlikely. We as a group are concerned that there is a danger of a rush to reorganisation. Basingstoke is a great place to live, work and enjoy yourself, and it's an economic powerhouse of this area. Basingstoke mustn't be sidelined or pushed into something for the sake of the latest government deadline or antic. Our democratic structures have been in place for many years, and we shouldn't allow them to be torn up in the middle of the holiday season and replaced by a potentially rushed, ill-thought-through and unequal proposal without any meaningful consultation with our residents that may not be in our wider interest. Thank you.
I can only say that I agree with you entirely. I think even though we may set a date for a council meeting, we haven't done any work from our group to find out how many people can or cannot be available. I imagine all the other groups will wish to do the same thing. If we find that what we're actually going to get is an unrepresentative council, either in terms of the numbers or particularly the proportionality within those numbers, so that any particular group is being unfairly disadvantaged, then I think we'd have to think again either whether or not we have the meeting, or if we have the meeting, the level of commitment that can be given by that meeting at that particular moment in time. If we could get comfort that still what was being put forward, even though people might want to use the word proposal, could be wrapped around with so many caveats that it was only a non-binding expression of something or other, then we might consider that, you know, jointly, that we could go ahead with it. But that's something which I think we need to incorporate all groups in that discussion to find out how we want to take that forward. And I can only say that from the discussions which I've had with other leaders in my role of representing other districts in this, that they feel exactly the same, and they don't want to be bounced into it either. So I don't think we're alone in that kind of expression of concern about the way the process is going. But I think there is a fairly uniform agreement across all the districts and the unitaries that there is a prize here worth going for, provided we can go there in the right way. But it is worth really doing the best that we can to try and follow this through, and that's what we will continue to do as much as we can. And I think I've probably said as much as I need to on that tonight. Thank you very much. So, just for noting, there is a revised decision notice which we will publish. I mean, I read it out effectively during the course of that, so not much to be said about that. I just have one particular point. For the record, I want to go back to the Parks and Open Spaces paper. You put forward something, Councillor Raffel, 216. I'm desperately trying to find out where 216 is. Can you direct us to a page number on that, so that we know where we're supposed to be putting it, because it's not in a decision notice.
Page 26 of 94.
26 of 94. So what we need to... you're putting that in as a 216, which is...
I suppose it would become number 6 on the decision notice. Number 6 on the...
Yes. Yeah, we'll put it in. Okay, that's what I wanted to be clear, that the decision notice will be amended to have that wording as number 6. Right, so that's good Lord, is it 10 to 8? I think we've all had enough for a night, don't you? The meeting is now closed. Thank you all very much.